They told me it was just aging, that the cramps were nothing, that the fatigue came with the years, that I should be grateful it wasn't worse. But pain doesn't care about age. It arrives like a letter without a stamp, persistent, personal, impossible to ignore. At 3 a.m., when my leg twisted again, sharp and certain, I stopped listening to them and started listening to me. The trouble with aging is not that the body changes, but that people stop believing you when it does. They nod, they smile, they say, "That's just how it is at your age." But I knew the difference between discomfort and alarm, between slowing down and being pulled down from the inside. The cramps weren't just pain, they were punctuation, interrupting the story my body was trying to tell long before I found the words. I didn't need reassurance. I needed permission to trust what I already felt. This wasn't just aging, it was a warning, and I was finally ready to listen. It started with a cramp, a sharp twist in my left calf that woke me from sleep like someone had grabbed my leg from beneath the bed. I reached for the nightstand, rubbed the muscle, breathed through my teeth until it softened again. The next morning, I mentioned it in passing, just a small comment over toast. "My leg's been acting up lately." They smiled, tilted their heads. "That's just age," they said. "Happens to everyone." I wanted to believe them, wanted to think this was normal, just one more ache in a body that had earned its miles. But something inside me flinched, not the muscle, something quieter, something that whispered, "This isn't just age. This is your body trying to be heard." The cramps returned, not always in the same place. Sometimes the thigh, sometimes the foot. Once, a ripple through my stomach, so sudden I had to stop walking. Each time, I told myself to wait, to be patient, to not be dramatic. But pain doesn't ask for patience. It asks for presence. Still, I hesitated. Not because I was afraid, but because I didn't want to be wrong. Didn't want to walk into a clinic only to be told again, "It's just age." So I did what many do. I folded the pain into silence, took longer baths, ate fewer things, waited. But the waiting didn't work, because the body, even when ignored, keeps talking. It doesn't forget what we refuse to say aloud. And the cramps, each one, felt less like inconvenience and more like a message growing tired of being dismissed. The cramps weren't the only thing. There was something else, less sharp but more persistent. A heaviness in my gut. Not pain exactly, just a kind of murmur I couldn't name. At first I blamed food, too much fiber, too little. Maybe I was dehydrated, maybe I wasn't chewing enough. I became careful, then cautious, then quiet. Mornings changed. The bowl of oats no longer felt right. My appetite thinned, like a conversation losing its thread. Then came the inconsistency. Some days, everything moved as it should. Others, nothing did. And still, no one seemed worried. "That's just what happens," they said. "Slower digestion, slower system. It's all part of getting older." I nodded, but inside, I didn't feel slower. I felt stuck, like something was being withheld by something that didn't trust me anymore. I tried all the usual things: more water, walking after meals, cutting dairy, adding fiber, subtracting everything else. But my body wasn't reacting to food. It was reacting to being unheard. I began to notice the cramps came after nights of discomfort, as if the unease was migrating, looking for somewhere to speak. The gut isn't just a system, it's a space, a messenger, and mine had been quiet for too long. So I started something small, a warm cup of fennel tea before bed, a hand on my belly in the dark, not to fix, just to notice. And in that noticing, I felt the first softness in weeks. No answers, just less tension. Sometimes the problem isn't the symptom, it's the story around it, the one where you're told to ignore your own knowing because discomfort has become normalized. I knew better. My gut had been saying so all along. It wasn't just the cramps or the unease in my gut. It was the tiredness, the kind that didn't come after effort, the kind that met me before I even left the bed. I used to walk every morning. I used to move. But now, even rising felt like something I needed permission for. It wasn't a lack of sleep. It wasn't sadness. It was something deeper, as if my body had begun retreating into itself without telling me. I said it once to someone I trusted, that I felt hollow, that no amount of rest felt like enough. They nodded, but it was the kind of nod that ends a conversation instead of opening one. "You're not 30 anymore," they said, smiling like that would help. I smiled back, but inside, I felt something shut, because I wasn't looking for 30. I was looking for me, the one I used to feel inside this skin. The fatigue wasn't ordinary. It wasn't from work, or stress, or age. It was the weight of something unknown pulling gently, consistently, from the inside. I tried to explain it again, to another voice, another room. They told me to walk more, eat less sugar, smile more. I did what they said, but my body still whispered, no. So, I stopped asking permission to believe myself. I began noticing, tracking, not with numbers, but with breath. Which mornings felt harder, which nights came with that quiet ache behind my eyes, the kind that felt like my body was dimming without turning off the light. I didn't have a name for it yet, but I knew this wasn't just aging. It was something waiting to be taken seriously. And this time, I decided to take it seriously myself. The moment I decided to go wasn't dramatic. There was no fall, no emergency. Just a morning where I looked at my reflection and didn't feel like I was in it anymore. I'd had another cramp at 3 a.m., this one in both legs. I sat on the edge of the bed, hands pressed to my calves, and for the first time, I didn't curse. I just breathed. It didn't feel like pain. It felt like a request, one my body had been sending in different languages for months. I got dressed slowly, wrote the symptoms on a torn envelope. Not for them, for me, to prove I wasn't imagining it. When I arrived, the nurse asked questions gently. The doctor listened longer than I expected. I told him everything. The cramps, the gut, the fatigue, even the part where I stopped feeling like myself. They didn't rush me, didn't dismiss me. They took blood, scheduled scans, said things like, "We want to understand what your body is telling you." And I wept. Not because I was scared, but because someone finally said it, that my pain was worth interpreting, that my story wasn't overreacting, that I wasn't crazy for noticing what I'd been told to ignore. That day, I walked home slower than usual, not from exhaustion, from relief. Something had shifted, not in diagnosis, not yet, but in the quiet knowing that I had stepped back into the center of my own body. And this time, I wasn't leaving it alone. The call came on a Thursday, not early, not rushed, just a calm voice asking if I could come in to talk through the results. My chest didn't tighten, my hands didn't shake. I already knew. Somewhere between the cramps, the sleepless nights, the quiet fatigue that settled like dust, my body had been leaving breadcrumbs, and now I was following them. The doctor said the words gently. Colon cancer, caught early, treatable. I nodded. Let the syllables land. Didn't cry, didn't collapse. Because by the time they told me, I had already begun grieving the months I hadn't trusted myself, the mornings I'd swallowed discomfort, the nights I'd called pain nothing. I remembered every moment someone told me, this is just part of getting older, and how I believed them because believing myself felt too inconvenient. But standing in that office, I didn't feel betrayed by my body. I felt sorry for how long I'd waited to honor what it had been saying all along. After the appointment, I sat in the car for a while, engine off, hands resting in my lap, and I whispered, not from fear but from recognition. You were right. Not to the doctor, not to anyone else, to my legs, to my stomach, to the parts of me that tightened and ached and trembled for attention. I wasn't afraid. I was awake. And in that moment, I wasn't just someone who had received a diagnosis. I was someone who had come back to herself. We often think grief only follows loss, a person, a future, a name we can no longer say out loud. But there is another kind, quieter, harder to explain. It lives in the moments we silenced ourselves, in the way we said, it's probably nothing, in the way we apologized for pain that showed up too often or not clearly enough. It's the grief of having known and not acted, of having noticed and brushed it aside. It is the ache that comes not from the diagnosis, but from the delay. The months we believed others more than our own bones. The mornings we labeled as aging what was actually warning. This grief doesn't cry. It sighs. It sits with us in parking lots, on toilet lids, beside tea kettles that take too long to boil. It doesn't ask for comfort. It asks for honesty. Because we are not just mourning what could have happened. We are mourning what we didn't give ourselves permission to feel. And yet, even that grief is not cruel. It arrives not to punish, but to clear a space, to say, you ignored this. But now that you see it, can you stay? Grief is not what breaks us. It's what begins again once we admit that our bodies were never lying. They were just waiting for us to come back and listen. There is a moment, quiet, without applause, when you realize you had known all along, not everything, not the diagnosis, not the name of what would come, but something, a sense, a rhythm out of step, a hum beneath the skin that said, this isn't how your body usually speaks. And for so long, you called that hum worry, or overthinking, or just being difficult to please. But now, in the hush after answers arrive, you see it differently. It wasn't panic, it was intuition. The deep, soft voice that lives below logic. The one that doesn't shout, so it gets ignored. But it was never wrong. The body is not just a machine. It is memory. It is instinct. It is compass. And when you return to it, not with fear, but with reverence, it responds. Even after being overlooked, even after being told, this is nothing, it still waits, not for perfection, just for presence. This is the real shift, not from sickness to health, but from separation to reunion. A willingness to believe yourself, to trust that your noticing is not the problem. It's the beginning of something sacred. You don't need to prove anything now. You only need to pause before the next step and ask, what do I already know? And then walk in that direction. Not all wake-ups are alarms. Some arrive in the dark, without sound, without drama. Just a quiet ache in the leg, a shift in the gut, a fatigue that lingers longer than it should. And when they come, you don't need to panic. You only need to listen. The body isn't trying to scare you. It's trying to stay in relationship with you, even after being overlooked, even after being told it's just your age. It still wants to speak, in cramps, in sighs, in the subtle ways your breath changes when something isn't right. You don't need to fix everything tonight. You don't need a plan. You just need to pay attention to what has been asking for attention all along. The body remembers even when you forget. It forgives even when you ignore. It waits even when you turn away. And when you return, with warm hands, with a softer pace, with one question whispered gently inward, it doesn't close the door. It opens. Again. So if something keeps tugging at you, a pain, a pattern, a small knowing that won't sit still, don't rush to silence it. Stay. Ask what it wants to show you. Ask what it's been trying to say beneath all the noise. You may not get an answer tonight, but you'll get something else, presence. And presence is where healing begins. If this story reminded you of something you haven't said out loud yet, start there. And if you ever forget again, know this. We'll be here in the pause between the ache and the answer. Until next time, take one slower breath and take care of your story.